On Monday, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused the United States of destabilizing the world. In his comments, Lavrov ripped the U.S. for issuing regular threats against North Korea and Iran, saying they had further destabilized the global situation. Lavrov did not mention Donald Trump by name, but the U.S. president has issued multiple threats to North Korea and Iran, attacking leadership in both nations. The minister went on to then warn the U.S. not to back out of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which Trump has vowed to tear up. The president signed a waiver on Iran's sanctions last week on Friday under the deal, but signaled that he wouldn't do it again.
Я думаю, что господин Ким Чен Ир, безусловно, эту партию выиграл. Он решил свою стратегическую задачу. У него есть ядерный заряд. Есть теперь ракета глобальной дальности до 13 тысяч километров, которая может достичь любой точки практически земного шара, во всяком случае, любой точки на территории его вероятного противника. Грамотный, абсолютно, грамотный и зрелый уже политик. Надо исходить из реалий, из того, что есть, а исходя из реалий действовать крайне аккуратно.
Seoul's top diplomat is in Vancouver for high-level international discussions on the situation with North Korea. But with China and Russia not invited to the talks, questions over the meeting's credibility are already being raised. Guan Zhang-o reports.
The inaugural Vancouver Foreign Ministers meeting on security and stability on the Korean Peninsula will open on Tuesday. Co-hosted by the US and Canada, the meeting aims to boost the global effort to find a peaceful resolution to the North Korea nuclear situation. Those invited are being called the Vancouver Group and will include most countries that fought in the Korean War under the UN flag, such as the UK, France and Turkey, as well as South Korea, and other interested parties like India, Japan and Sweden. However, notable absentees include China, Russia and North Korea. It's unclear whether they were formally invited or not, but their absence has caused some to question the effectiveness and purpose of the meeting. Beijing has criticized it, saying that without all the major relevant parties involved, the meeting won't help the situation on the Korean Peninsula and only divide the international community even further.
Turkey, Syria and Russia have attacked a US plan to form a 30,000-strong border security force in northern Syria. Turkey's president accused Washington of trying to create a terror army and pledged to, quote, drown it before it comes into being. And the Syrian government has vowed to drive the US presence from its territory. The US says the force will secure areas along Syria's border to the north with Turkey and to the east with Iraq. It will be mostly made up of fighters from the Syrian Democratic Forces, who Turkey considers terrorists. The SDF is a US-backed alliance of Kurdish and Arab fighters, which currently controls almost 25% of Syrian territory in the north and east. Russia says its US plot to partition Syria.
Now, during talks in Washington, the Syrian rebel representatives have urged US officials to revive a suspended CIA program, providing military aid to militants fighting pro-government forces. Now, a senior official of the Free Syrian Army, Mustafa Sajari, stressed that the U.S. should get serious about challenging Iran's growing influence in the country. Sajari underlined the Iranian role in backing Shiite Muslim militias, which, along with Russian air power, changed the situation on the ground in favor of Damascus. Now, the program was launched in 2013 under the Obama administration. Its aim was to provide training for selected recruits from the Free Syrian Army at bases located in Jordan, and also to supply weapons and equipment. The overall cost of the U.S. aid was around $1 billion a year.
Saudi Arabia and the United States have been partners for many years. The U.S. needs oil and the Saudis buy arms, $350 billion worth in the past decade. A new generation of Saudi leaders were adjusting to what it had seen as a resurgent Iran and a retreating American presence in the Middle East. Then came Donald Trump. His first foreign trip as president was to the kingdom. He danced and delivered a speech that emboldened the Saudi leadership. Trump pledged to take an aggressive stance towards Iran, Saudi Arabia's biggest rival in the region. He also wanted an end to funding terrorism. A month after his visit, the Saudis cut off diplomatic and economic ties with Qatar. Trump drummed out a tweet.
The nation of Qatar, unfortunately, has historically been a funder of terrorism at a very high level. We have to stop the funding of terrorism.
Qatar's wealth hasn't made them immune from sanctions, as Saudi and the Emirates blockaded their Gulf neighbour.
They were accusing Qatar that Qatar is closer to Iran and have close ties to Iran, and now by their measures, declaring those measures against Qatar, they are pushing Qatar toward Iran.
The United Arab Emirates said Qatari fighter jets intercepted 2 of its commercial airplanes in international airspace, a charge Doha has denied. According to a January 15th report from the UAE's official news agency, both civilian planes were intercepted during routine flights to Bahrain. The agency called the act a flagrant threat to the safety of civil aviation and a clear violation of international law. Qatar has denied the allegations as completely untrue. The claim could further escalate tensions in the Gulf region. The UAE is one of 4 Arab countries, along with Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Egypt, that have been boycotting Qatar for months, accusing Doha of supporting terrorism.
The Nile River is Egypt's only source of water. Without it, this farm couldn't survive. So news that Ethiopia has started diverting the Blue Nile, one of the Nile's 2 main tributaries, is worrying a lot of Egyptians.
The
whole country is concerned, especially the farmers, because our lives depend on the Nile. We eat from it and drink from it, and all this land needs water. I grow cucumbers. If there's no water, what would I do?
Work on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam started in 2011. It was the idea of the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, who wanted to make Ethiopia the largest producer of hydroelectric power in Africa. Now the government says it's getting close to that goal as the 6,000 megawatt dam nears completion. Its 1.8-kilometer wall straddles the Blue Nile in a deep gorge where the northern Ethiopian mountains slope downwards towards the Sudanese border. Its reservoir will have the capacity to hold up to 74 billion cubic meters of water, and it spans an area of 1,680 square kilometers. Ethiopian officials say the sole purpose of the dam is to generate electricity, but Egypt, the major downstream benefiter of the Nile water, is deeply concerned. It says Ethiopia is trying to control the flow of the Nile, which could threaten its water security.
We
usually work and cooperate to avoid any kind of tension, and there are some issues that should be taken away and separated from others. And I think the water issue for Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia should bring us together in union, because it's the issue related to the future and the interest of the three countries.
Egypt's concerned that a rapid filling up of the reservoir could drastically reduce the flow of water from the Blue Nile. Ethiopia has not said how long it will take to fill the reservoir. However, Ethiopia's immediate downstream neighbor Sudan has expressed satisfaction with the project, saying it's going to preserve part of its water that used to flow into Egypt. Egypt refers to a colonial-era treaty that gave it a 78% share of the Nile, which it sees as a historic right. But other Nile Basin countries, including Ethiopia, were not part of that deal and have since signed their own agreement.
This dam is not going to bring any significant harm upon the Egyptian side, and we are working on this. We're trying to be very transparent.
There are reports Ethiopia has increased security measures around the dam and put in place a no-fly zone in the area. This is a sensitive region. Last week, Sudan closed its border with Eritrea and sent thousands of troops to the area after reports of possible troop deployment from Egypt and the United Arab Emirates inside Eritrea. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's Prime Minister is visiting Khartoum and Egypt for crucial discussions on the dam, with hopes of finding a way forward.
Palestinian officials voted on Monday to no longer recognize Israel or coordinate on security matters. The Palestine Liberation Organization Central Council recommended the changes to the Executive Committee after a fiery speech from Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Abbas claimed Israel had terminated the Oslo Accords, which were the basis for peaceful negotiations between Israel and Palestinians toward a two-state solution. Abbas will have a final say on whether to go through with the recommendations, but his political career and current post are direct results of the Oslo Accords. Tensions in the region have been high since President Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, despite the fact that the two-state solution framework calls for Israelis and Palestinians to negotiate ownership of the city together. Vice President Mike Pence is scheduled to visit the Middle East later this month. Abbas was originally supposed to meet with Pence, but canceled in protest of Trump's decision.
Several people have been injured after a blast brought down a residential building in the Belgian city of Antwerp. Police say they do not believe the incident was terror-related, with state broadcaster RTBF reporting the collapse was most likely caused by a gas explosion. Belgium has been on high alert since deadly suicide bombings in Brussels in 2016. Though 3 people, including a child, had to be pulled from the rubble, those injured in Monday night's blast are not believed to have sustained serious injuries.
Prison workers' unions in France are taking nationwide action this Monday, calling for a total blockade of jails. They're demanding better staff protection after 3 guards were injured by a convicted terrorist at a prison in the north. Charlotte Dubensky reports from outside that facility where one of the protests is underway.
The guards and their family and supporters have come out today to have one of the blockages. This is a blockage that's been called for prisons across France. As you can see, they're burning tyres behind me as part of this blockage. They've also been putting out household instruments such as washing machines, fridge freezers to block the entrance to this prison. And they've also been graffitiing the floor. Now in the graffiti they're saying sufferance, dysfunctional in regards to how they see the prison system working here in France. And abattoir, they're calling it a slaughterhouse for the workers, and that's because they say they face aggression on a daily basis.
Our work is very dangerous. We're victims of aggression and insults. We experience violence, which is not taken into consideration by the government.
It has become more and more difficult for us to act. I've seen physical aggression towards my colleagues every day. It happens every time we open the cell doors.
But this latest blockage has been caused by one particular incident that took place. An inmate, a convicted jihadist who was involved in the 2002 attacks in Tunis, Tunis, which killed 21 people, is here, and he attacked 3 prison guards. Now, we know that this prisoner is due to finish his sentence here in France soon and is under a warrant to be extradited to the USA, and that's because he's alleged to have links to Al-Qaeda. It's been proven already here in France, but he's wanted in America for involvement in the attacks on 2001 on New York, those September 11th attacks where thousands of people lost their lives in those attacks that were claimed by Al-Qaeda.
Supporters of a hardline Islamic group protested against Facebook in Jakarta, Indonesia, after the social media platform blocked pages associated with the group. The Islamic Defenders Front, with the Indonesian acronym FPI, is a conservative Islamic group that advocates Sharia law. The group organized mass protests last year against Jakarta's Christian governor, accusing him of insulting the Quran. He was voted out of office in April and jailed for blasphemy. On January 12, about 200 FBI supporters marched to Facebook's Jakarta headquarters and held a rally under heavy police presence. An FBI spokesman demanded to know why the group's accounts were blocked, while others spreading hate against Islam were not. A Facebook representative said the company allows people to use the site to challenge ideas, but it removes content promoting hate or violence towards people with different views.
As a vote to pass contested reforms in the Greek parliament took place, a group of demonstrators tried to enter the building but were forced back by police. From early evening, around 20,000 people had gathered in central Athens, overcoming the city's transport strike to show their anger at yet more austerity measures and labour reforms. Our reporter says demonstrators arrived peacefully in front of the parliament. However, once again, Molotov cocktails, stones and tear gas have turned Syntagma Square into a battlefield. Minutes before, trade union members had marched up to Parliament. Their main grievance is the change to labour laws, making it harder for unions to call strikes. Lazanos Andrianos is a university student. He says if the government's continuing austerity programme is the only choice, then there is no alternative for us other than to fight back, to demonstrate and to work for a better future. This is the biggest challenge for my generation. The situation is unbearable. Around 500,000 young educated Greeks have already left the country in order to find jobs. All eyes are now on August, which hopefully will mark the end of Greece's bailout era.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau let Canadian pro-lifers know exactly where they stand.
An organization that has the explicit purpose of restricting women's rights by removing rights to abortion is not in line with where we are as a government and, quite frankly, where we are as a society.
By now, you've heard all about the Internet of Things, or IoT. So-called smart homes feature internet-connected TVs, washing machines, thermostats, doorknobs, and locks, all controllable by smartphones. There are web-linked security cameras, smart showers, and, yes, you guessed it, online toilets. The Internet of Things also includes under things, as Nima Maravaji of Spire explains.
You simply put it right here.
The gizmo attaches to your bra or your briefs and gives you feedback on your health.
Ultimately, our clothes are going to be informing us about how to make the small baby step micro decisions that actually lead to better health.
By 2030, the IoT may add $14 trillion to the world economy, according to the management consulting firm Accenture. Sounds great, doesn't it? But the more connected people and their products become, the more at risk they are for a digital attack.
It opens up the possibility for risks of security natures. These are computers that have some computing power, always on, always connected, and they're very appealing to the bad guys. And the problem is, as you're rushing to put this stuff on the market, sometimes you use products off the shelf, and they have bugs in them, and you redistribute those bugs to your customers.
What? You don't know what Bitcoin is? We receive our salary in Bitcoin, so we feel nervous about its market price the day before payday. Our salary depends on the market fluctuations.
In the 16th century, an epidemic known as coccolizli that caused bleeding and vomiting swept through large areas of Guatemala, Mexico, and even reached Peru. It wiped out 80% of the population, killing millions of people. Ancient DNA and a new technique have been used to determine the likely cause of this mysterious epidemic that contributed to a cataclysmic population decline. Salmonella genomes, which caused typhoid fever, were recovered from DNA within the teeth of 10 skeletons buried in an undisturbed coccolizli, or pestilence, cemetery in Oaxaca, Mexico. This would be the first known occurrence of Salmonella in the Americas, according to a new study published in the journal Nature on Monday. Typhoid fever has long been suspected due to the recorded symptoms, but this is the first identification of bacteria at the site. The researchers also believe that the arrival of Europeans to what was then known as Mesoamerica caused the devastating epidemic. Europeans were susceptible to enteric fever, also known as typhoid fever, and it is very likely that they were carriers for the disease when they arrived to conquer Mesoamerica.
Where's my keys?
The bond between this man and his dog is strong. So when Daniel Ashamin realized his car had been stolen from the parking lot of his restaurant, with his dog Holly in the back seat, he says he was beside himself.
Man, I had a heart attack. I don't care about my car. I really love my dog.
Ashamin says he and his wife couldn't sleep not knowing where their dog was. Their anguish came to an end when they say police got a call reporting the location of the car. And that led cops to the suspected thief, who reportedly admitted to leaving Holly at a homeless camp.
I was the happiest man in the world. Man, I love that dog so much. Let's go.
Ashamin says he and Holly were relieved to see each other again.
She sits in the passenger seat and looked at me, and boom, she fell asleep. I don't think she slept for 2 days.
And now he can sleep too, knowing Holly is safe at home, thanks to people who called police when they noticed something suspicious.
I don't know what to say, man. I'm really grateful. Really, really grateful.